is using this entire trunk as one massive lever around his hip joint. Ladies and gentlemen, hello and a very warm welcome. My name is Aram. Welcome to the Competitive Rowing channel. This video is about one of the world's best rowers. Welcome to the video analysis of Damir Martin. One of the best rowers in the world and one of the rowers with a mindset of a winner. What this guy has achieved is incredible. He's come back from injuries, he's come back from down phases, he's come back from the most odd positions because he's not just a very good athlete with brilliant technique. This guy is a fighter. I'm going to structure this video analysis just like the one Zach purchased in a video before, and if you haven't watched it, I highly recommend you check this one out, in two stages. Stage one is going to be the general analysis from a beginner's and intermediate athlete's point of view. So if you're new to rowing and you just tapped into the topic a bit, I don't want to overload you with crazy details. Stage two is going to be from a professional standpoint of view in terms of you're already fast. The question is, how do you make the last bit? Check it out. So stage one, a beginner's point of view. If you row this way, you've made it. You have made it. You belong to a very nice elite group of rowers who can control their body well enough that you don't create a lot of disturbance for the boat. You are able to use your body levers the best way possible. And you're strong enough so you can use most of your leg force. Let's go through the details. Every stroke cycle for me personally starts at the finish. At the finish, the first thing to pay attention to is the blades. That is where you should tap out with your blades at the very same point of time, with the very same speed to the very same depth, left and right. And that is true for the single, for the double, for the quad, for the pair, for the 4, and for the 8. That's one of the principles. If you offset your boat here, it is very difficult to stabilize it on the following recovery. So stage one, make sure you get your blades out in a very synchronized way. Does Damir do that? Yes, absolutely. Is this the cleanest exit possible? No. But is it a practical exit? Yes. I know that as a beginner, you're being taught to clear the water as much as you can. In reality, the finish is always a wash out, no matter how good you are. And if you look at this right here, this is a wash out. Damir doesn't get his blades all the way out of the water. He gets it out of the water partially. And once it's out most of the way, you can start to feather. Feather is what we call to bring your blade into a flat position. What I would not do is have so little clearance to the water. Especially in conditions like these, everybody's tempted just to enjoy the glassy lake. And realistically, this is too good to be true. I don't know many race situations where this kind of weather would be available. Usually, it's quite the opposite. So, if you find conditions like these, enjoy them, but don't take them for granted. And certainly don't expect that you will have these in a race situation. At that stage, the second cue point is the rock over. So the rock over should happen with a few things in mind. First of all, try to pull up your trunk. I talked about this recently. You really want to try to pull the trunk in length. You want to make it longer. You start with your belt buckle, your imaginary belt buckle, and it reaches all the way up to where your heart rate strap would be. Does he do that? Certainly. He's got very nice integrity of his trunk. Second point, hold your knees stable. I don't want to say locked out, but hold your knees stable for as long as possible. So at that stage, the knees should hold stable for as long as possible. The trunk should pull up. And with the idea of stable knees and a trunk that pulls up, you can start to do the rotation around the hip joint. Now you may ask, hey, why is it possible, why is it necessary that my legs should be stable, my knees should be stable? Why can't they bend earlier? Well, the thing is, your hips are being held in place with your legs. Now, if your legs bend, your hips are going forward. And it's very difficult to rotate this huge trunk around something that is actually moving forward itself. It is much easier to rotate forward when your hip joints are held in place with your legs. Pulling up the trunk makes it easier to use your trunk as one fully integrated lever. And this is what Damir Martin is doing as well. So that is something I have not seen with many pro athletes. That is something that separates him from the good. That's why he is one of the best. He's able to hold his knees down. I know this is low steady state practice. I know that the coach was next to him taking a video. I know that he probably took care to be extra precise. But even when people try to do this, they forget about that point. And for him, it was important, which means that he must have worked on that before. And that, for me, solves also another issue. If you can rotate the entire trunk around the hip joint forward, right there, then you will have most of your weight on the seat and on the heels, because as you rotate forward, you will have a little bit of tension on your hamstrings right there. If you have tension on your hamstrings, you have more downforce on your heels right there, which means you're very well connected to the foot stretchers and to the boat, and you can only move the boat from the feet. The blades are just a means of help to propel something, but you are planted into that boat with your feet. And actually what we need is the feet to oarlock connection for you pros out there. Let us stick with the basics. If, when you go forward, you see his hands are well beyond his knees. Here are the knees, and his hands are way past the knees. Way past the knees. And his knees are still locked. That is huge. If you have the discipline to do that, and just give the boat time to run all the time, his hip joints have been stabilized, so he was able to do the full rotation with the trunk forward. That is huge. That is more important than I can explain here. Now he slowly starts to attract the boat. In my humble opinion, he's not even trying to slide forward. To me, it looks like he's actually trying to propel the boat. That's a different mindset. If you're trying to pull the boat, you are working more with a stable trunk. You can try this out. If your idea is to pull the boat with the feet towards yourself, you will move differently, you will sit differently than you sliding forward. If you have the tendency that you want to slide forward, what is going to happen is that you will put more and more body weight onto your hands. But if you try to attract something, you have to keep most of your body weight on the seat and on the feet, so you have light hands for the catch. Why this is important? Just a moment later. So the idea is to use the feet and try to bring the boat that way. Why would this work, do you say? Because you're in a seat with wheels? Well, you are much heavier than the boat. I know we have to take into consideration water resistance. Nevertheless, a single weighs around 14 to 16 kilos. That's much lighter than you are. So you can use the inertia of your mass and try to let the boat run underneath yourself, but also kind of accelerate it a tiny bit. Not much. If you overdo it, water is much stronger than your body weight is, so you will then be dragged forward to the foot stretchers. You don't want that. But a gentle bit of a come closer is exactly what you're looking for at that stage. That only works if you've done your homework before and you held the knees down until your trunk was in the final forward facing position. At that stage, his shoulders are very low, and you can see there's a bit of a stretch around the shoulder blades right there. This is the kind of roundness we're looking for. Many people think you need a dead straight back for rowing. No, you need some kind of flexibility and looseness. Where we don't need looseness and flexibility is right here. So Damir Martin's position is not perfect, and we'll talk about this later. But the rounding of his shoulder here is very important. The question is, are your shoulders high or not? I think his shoulders are more on the higher end, but they're still low enough to engage the lat sufficiently. So the kind of force transfer we're looking for is through the body, through the lower end, and through the armpit. We're not looking for force transfer here. There will be something over the top. You cannot avoid this. But you want to have most of the work being done with the armpit. And what you need in addition to that, you need to be able to engage your pecs. So your pec minor, for example. At the catch, you want to go in a bit with forward facing, forward stretched shoulders, held down into the trunk with your lat, and your pec minor helps you to go around the pin. Because what most people don't realize is that in a boat situation, if you pull straight in a true boat environment, your hands will be forced together because these inwards can only go around the pins. Now, if you're used to pulling straight from the linear erg, what happens is that your shoulders become stiff and numb to the motion around the pin. So what do you do if your shoulders are too stiff? Well, you have to bring the upper body up. If you use the upper body too early, if you rotate too early, and in that case your hands are being forced together by the inboards coming closer, then you waste a lot of that upper body pivot potential for later on during the drive. This is why it's very, very important to be able to control and willingly let the hands come together with low shoulders, long shoulders, and with the help of the pec. You cannot work on that on a linear erg, but you should work on that in a boat. If you're on a bi-rower, this is exactly what's going to shape a perfect force curve. We have that immediate force pickup. As he reaches the catch, you don't see any additional forward lean until now. Here, that is something we're going to discuss later. Look at the blades. When do his blades enter the water? That quick turnaround point, and you see it's a wash in. It is not a straight down and then pull. This would stop the boat. It's a gentle, light wash in. It's a smooth wash in. There is almost no splash. I mean, in these conditions, go figure. But he's trying to row powerfully, but at the same time, he's trying to row smoothly as well. And that catch is extremely smooth. It is not perfect, and I will discuss in a moment why. But it is extremely smooth, and for 99% of all people, this is going to be everything you ever want to attain. Now, during the drive, for the first part of the drive, he's trying to hold his trunk as much as possible, almost a solid leg drive. That's the phase where we're not talking about a deadlift. Most people think, rowing is a deadlift. Only partially. During that stage, it's a leg push where you try to hold the upper body in position. You do not want to create a rotation around the hip joints yet. That's not a deadlift. It becomes a deadlift now. However, from a very awkward position. So if we talk about deadlifts, it's probably more an RDL, a Romanian deadlift, than anything else. And that's also what I put on the plan for my masters athletes and pro athletes. We don't do regular deadlifts. If we do deadlifts at all, we do Romanian deadlifts for the sake of pelvic full range of motion strength. If you want to join, it's rmtraining.com. I leave a link in the description, or you simply visit the website, rmtraining.com. At that stage, he's now using his legs to propel the upper body, and that's something I cannot emphasize enough. You see, these oars are bending massively. At that stage, he still has the shoulders low. They're not going up. You can see that the lats are working. He's not trying to bend his arms. His arms are dead straight. They're not overextended, they're just in a loose hang. That's important. A lot of people try to have straight arms by means of extending them to the last bit possible. No, this is not what we want. And at that stage, his legs transfer energy into the trunk, through the lat, onto the arms. So it's all going on here. It's not so much the shoulders going up. It's not so much the traps. It's not so much the erectors. It is mostly lats. Lats and pecs and a lot of core here, ventral chain core, so the core muscles here in the front. Of course these muscles are working like crazy. Of course your erectors are engaged. That's the two big muscle strings next to your spine. Of course the traps are engaged. Of course the delts are engaged. All of these are engaged. Have to be. But the question is, how do you primarily transfer energy? And Damir Martin is using the lats. And that allows him to use his entire trunk as a lever. And that is something I'm missing with a lot of athletes. Damir Martin is able to accelerate the boat with his weight. This is why he's so quick. He's using this entire trunk as one massive lever around his hip joint. He's creating a lever of legs to trunk. He's playing the big game. Legs to trunk. Rowing is so simple, but it only works if you're able to hold your trunk in a solid posture. If you lose stability of the trunk, it's only legs. And the legs are very much prone to overwhelm the trunk. Damir Martin is a master in keeping his trunk tension alive and keeping his shoulders low so that he can engage the lat mid-drive, so that he's able to take advantage of the upper body swing. In the last video, I talked about why it's important to keep the shoulders low. Try with me. Keep your shoulders low. Try to make your lats right here very wide. Bring your shoulders up. You will feel how these become quite narrow. Lower your shoulders again. Lats become wide. That means high shoulders, high-pitched shoulders, will almost certainly disengage our lats to a degree where we cannot use the biggest muscles we have available for the job. But we'll go over the delts and the linear chains, and these are too weak. Our legs are too strong. We need to use something that is lower and bigger. So we use pecs and lats. These are the two biggest muscles for the job we can use, plus the transverse abdominis we mentioned before that is pulled up, and the obliques, of course, but that is a byproduct if we try to pull the trunk long. That's what we need to do. And Damir Martin is able to do that. His upper body leverage is a it's an opposition killer. If this guy puts on the afterburner and goes for a sprint, that is irresistible. It is almost impossible to beat this guy in a sprint. This is why when it comes down to the line, he's always there to bring results, because he can rely on a speed that he can build with his capacity to use legs against trunk, because his trunk is a fully integrated lever. This, for me, is the key reason why he is as fast as he is. Towards the finish. Even now, where everybody would be doing that, he's using his trunk to engage his arms. Now he's bringing in the arms. His arms engage from the lat. My team, worldwide, this is what I'm referring to when I'm talking about try to pull from your lat. Keep the shoulders low. He's using his trunk weight to use his arms. See how far he leans back? Yes, he leans back a lot, but boy, does he have resistance on the blade and feet. He's using his trunk to propel his arms. He's got big arms, but he's got a much bigger trunk. Well, of course you have to use the trunk. Does it make sense? Let me show you a different picture. From that perspective, it's almost even better to see. See how he's using the trunk? Even now, his trunk propels his hands. That's how you do the finish. Not with a jerky arm pull. Forget your arms. You have to use the full chain. Here you can see how patiently he waits with his knees. Now, when his hands have passed his knees, he's now starting to bend the knees and bring the boat closer. That is why it's so irresistibly quick. Let me show you something. This is the Olympic Games of 2021 in Tokyo. It was called 2020, but they held it 21, so for me it's 21. So you had Russia, Denmark, Greece, Norway, Croatia, and Lithuania. And Damir Martin was, you see here, he's in 4th place. And that's about mid-race. He was out of the medals. He was not out of the pack, but he was out of medal contention. And that was before Antuskos put down the hammer over the middle 1,000, overtook everybody. Damir Martin was even out of the medals at the 1,000. He's almost up with the Russian. Damir Martin is out of the medals here too. He's out of the medals significantly. Now watch him roll. Every stroke, he's using his upper body, hammers down, uses his body weight inching closer. Everybody else is doing this as well. Tuskos is doing it very well, but the two Scandinavians are not. Their boat is going smooth as hell. Excellent, but they're missing out on the upper body effect. I did a full video analysis on this. You find it right here. These are the last couple of meters. Tuskos in the lead. Damir Martin trying to inch closer. 500 meters to go. You see he's a full length, 2 lengths behind a medal. And look where he is now. He's using his upper body mass to make this boat fly. And all the two Scandinavians can respond with is a higher stroke rate. But every stroke that Damir Martin makes brings him a slight bit more in terms of distance traveled. And that is extremely difficult to match when you know how to keep the trunk as one fully integrated lever. Here you can see it best. Look at Damir Martin. Look at what he's doing. If he's bringing up the rate, then he's really quick. However, there's a caveat to that. This game doesn't work forever. You may ask, why didn't he bring up the rate mid-race? If you have a muscular build like Damir Martin, and there are athletes like this out there amongst you under 23s, juniors, masters, and elite level athletes, you are probably on the more explosive raw power side of athletes. You have to brace yourself for the middle 1000. You have to be very careful and you have to be very economical for a good part of the race because you can kill yourself too early. You have so much raw power that you can get into lactate nirvana way too quickly. So I personally believe Damir Martin knew that. So he tries to stay with the pack, but he doesn't try to kill himself leading it. Because he knows he can make up a lot with his sprint because he knows how to use his upper body weight and he's explosive. And that makes all the difference when you know how to pace the race based on your physiology. If you're more on the leaner side and you're not as muscular, it doesn't mean you're slow, but you're not as bulky. You don't have as much muscle mass to nourish throughout the race. Then you can go at a higher proportion of your maximum speed for most of the race. Your sprint capacity may not be as high. But if you are more on the raw power muscular side, then you have to brace yourself and you can rely on a good last 600 meters of a 2K or a good last 400 meters of a 1K. But don't wait too long. Now, let's get ready for stage 2 because there are things that are not perfect. Check it out. So this is, in my humble opinion, a rowing session where he was almost overpowering it. He was trying to compensate too much at the finish with his arms. That's just, I have no proof of that. It's just a side note here. That's my humble impression. The big deal happens here. From a professional coaching perspective, there might be an issue with his low back. And I think this might have been exactly where he had the back issues. I heard he had back issues. Here's a lack of mobility right here. You see this? He's not moving the entire trunk forward. Right here, he should be able to rotate around the hip joint, but he's not. I think that he sits too low. I think he should be pulling up a bit more. And that is something where I think if he were able to use his trunk even more and better, he doesn't have to use so much muscle work from his erectors trying to hold that trunk stable. But if he were able to rotate around the lower point, namely the hip joint, and it didn't have to support that part with pure brute muscle force, it would have been easier. How do I mean that? I think he created an additional turning point of energies. Energy goes either direction, here around the bend. So we have, if I draw this here, we have a bend like this. At least here you will find an unnecessary bend. Everybody has these weak points. I don't know anybody who's perfect and the perfect shoulders and everything. Maybe I find somebody. But that is something that will lead to injuries in in the mid and long run. Why? Because these muscles are easily overpowered by the huge leg force everybody has. Everybody overpowers their trunk with the legs. Why? Because your legs carry the trunk weight all day. Naturally, they're strong. So this is something where I think it was one of his weak points. And that becomes ever so obvious when we look at the next couple of frames, namely here. You see, he's trying to get more and more and more reach. He's trying to get more and more reach from this section here. This is ever so round. And yes, you should bring the shoulders forward, but he's creating an artificial bend here. So he's overcompensating with the upper torso what he couldn't do with the low torso. And I see this quite often. Many rowers have that. Sometimes it is something you can't do anything about and you have to live with it because this is how your spine is built. Okay. But if your spine is built that way, I think that your muscles don't have to work that hard to hold position. But if your spine is not built that way, your muscles have to compensate for that and hold as much as they can. And that what I think is what creates the problem. As he's going forward to the catch, you can see that he's more and more and more reaching forward, not just with a shoulder blade stretch, but he's actually bringing this part here forward ever so more. It's a slight bit of creeping. And you may say, well, it's almost nothing. It is something. It does make a lot of difference. When we talk about this exceptional high level, when it's down to rowing races have one of the closest finishes in terms of overall race distance to gap at the finish. So we need to take every bit of advantage we can. And if you bring your upper body weight forward at that stage, you will load your hands a bit. And if you pay close attention, when I did the general analysis just before, from an amateur's point of view, you probably saw that his blades were not perfect. Let's go forward a bit. Here at the catch, there's a consistent downforce this way. His hands are pushing deeper into the boat. His trunk is pushing forward and is pushing down. And that means the blades have a consistent tendency to go up at a stage where they actually should be going flat and then down. At that stage, they're going flat and then up because the trunk is not just pushing forward, it is pushing down because it's partially rotating around the hip joint, partially around an artificial bend about here and here. You will see the result in a second. At that stage, the blade should be ready to enter the water. But there's quite a bit of a gap. For the average rower, you may say, hey, this is almost nothing. Yes, but he's not an average rower. I don't know how many millions of strokes he's practiced. I don't say this is bad, but we're talking about how get the last bit of speed out of this entire system, athlete and boat. So now at the catch, it takes him quite a while. And this is why his entire trunk has to shift up. You see this? Here, right there, that section here has to move up just to get the blades into the water. Why? He's offloading the weight of his hands. He loaded his hands on a recovery. See this? The downforce I mentioned before. And now he's offloading the weight here. You may say, I don't know what you want, this is perfect. No. It's the fine detail. Tenacity in the muscle, it's how the muscle engages. And if you coach a lot like I do, you see these fine differences. And there is, I've been there myself, I know what it feels like if you dig too deep with your trunk at the catch. It's tempting. It's tempting when you know, I could have more reach, I just have to bend forward a bit. Yes, if you can compensate with the low trunk and pull the trunk up a bit more, it may work. But if you don't do this, it's not going to work. It's not going to work at all. And this tiny thing, repeated 250 times in an Olympic A final, not sure. Look at how the boat dips. So at that stage, look at how the boat's are, are going up and down at the finish. I'm talking about the vertical motion. So the boat being pushed deeper into the water. Compare Damir Martin and Sverre Nielsen. The Federer rower doesn't use his upper body at all, at least it looks like it. And of course you can create a very smooth boat run, but with the trade-off of not using upper body weight. Well, the trick is to find the balance between actually using upper body weight, because it does create a lot of speed, and dumping the boat too much. How to create that ideal balance? By controlling the upper body downward motion towards the catch. That's the trick. That solves the problem. But it takes a lot of discipline to be able to do that. Let's just look at that stomping of Damir Martin's boat. Yes, you see it as well with Sverre Nielsen, but by far not as much as with Damir Martin. There's a lot more up and down motion. This could be minimized if he'd be controlling this. Because of that, you always have to keep in mind, this is low steady state. In low steady state, you can compensate a lot because everything is slower. But you cannot compensate this anymore at a stroke width 35 going on for 2,000 meters. That is what I think is the only pitfall I see. The only one. And you may ask, okay, what's the big deal if my upper body rotates too early? Well, the first big problem is that your blades have a tendency to go in deeper than necessary. The thing is, all you want to create here at the catch, so if that's the blade, you want to create a horizontal lock. So you want to lock your blade in the water with a nice pressure difference. Every time you're changing altitude, you create slip. So you don't have the same solid hold on the water that you could have with a vertically stabilized blade. But your blade will go deeper if your hands go up. And your hands will go up if that here is too weak to hold position. You can compensate by lengthening out the shoulders in low steady state. This is, I think, why we see a lot of active shoulder motion with Damir Martin in low steady state. Did you realize that? Looks like he's pulling a lot with his shoulders here. A bit of forward and backward. See this? And he's got very wide shoulders, so it becomes more obvious again. And another problem is how you engage the muscles. If you rotate around your hip joint very early at a stage where you want to keep the upper body essentially motionless, not tensionless, motionless. At that stage, your legs will trigger. The question is, which muscles do you want to use in order to hold the upper body stable and only push with your legs? Because this is nothing you would do in powerlifting, for example. So at that stage, you need to engage the posterior chain and the anterior chain. And these almost nullify or compensate each other to a degree where the muscles work against each other. They have to do so to create stability to a certain degree. But at that stage, we don't want an even matching agonist to antagonist ratio. At that stage, we want to create motion. And motion is only created when there is an imbalance in tension between agonist and antagonist. So the player and the counterplayer. At that stage, we do want a very strong posterior chain, but only the upper section of it and here the quads. And that's exactly what's so difficult about it. You have to have a lot of core tension not to engage the full posterior chain. We do want to engage the full posterior chain during the upper body swing. And we do this by triggering it with a massive leg drive into the upper body swing with our quads. But until then, we have to be on our almost tiptoeing. I mean, it doesn't feel like this when you're tired and your legs go crazy. But I think a lot of times, we rowers tend to have very empty legs when we just trigger the upper body swing too early because of ineffective upper body placement towards the catch. Because we're too handle heavy at the catch because we need to unload the weight, and then we're trapped in this upper body rotation we can't get out of. That makes our legs very, very tired. Okay, with this being said, I want to leave it here. After the last video on sack purchase, Zach, you were friendly enough to contact me and explain a bit about that, and thank you very much. It was a very good chat we had back and forth on LinkedIn, and I very much appreciate your positive feedback. Thank you, Zach. I hope you can learn from this video. I did a lot, and I learned a lot from this video. I put together a list of the best rowers in the world, and if you have any suggestions whom I should analyze, send me a link. It should be footage available on YouTube. That would be awesome, and it must be footage that is on YouTube legally. So it cannot be an illegal copy of a FISA race, of a world rowing race, and say, hey, go watch this, it's on my channel. No, I can't do this. So it has to be something that is there publicly and legally. If you want to work with me and join the Saturday live sessions, for example, it's rmtraining.com. Weekly coach sessions, or I could write your training plan, or we could do one-on-ones, or you could do a private video analysis. All of that is on rmtraining.com. And I would love to get your feedback either here in the comments or on rowing.zone. If you haven't heard about this, this is a social / classified ads network I'm trying to create for the rowing community, for everybody who loves rowing. And this is about getting everybody together. It's small, it's slowly growing, and we are roughly 200 members right now, or 250 members. It's tiny, and with you registering, it's going to become larger. And I want to serve the community with this platform where people can help each other on one centralized platform where there's everything rowing. This is why it's called the Rowing Zone, the zone for everything that is rowing related. The bi-rower that you saw in the intro and that you will see in the outro just in a moment is a project of my heart. Started 20 years ago. For 17 years I have between 1 and 3 day jobs to pay for the project, and I wanted to change the way we do indoor rowing, and I'm succeeding with this. I had massive back pain from rowing on a linear erg. I had a rib stress fracture from the linear erg up to the point where I couldn't sleep without pain anymore. And I know that a lot of young athletes are affected by this as well. So this is why we created something that would allow you to row exactly like in the boat but on land. And it was pretty much almost 20 years exact before I started to realize that out of these humble beginnings, starting with nothing, no experience, no money, no investors, no loans, up to date, no investors, no loans, and I want to keep it this way, we created what I hope to be the best rowing machine in the world. There were so many times where I thought, it's never going to go anywhere, but I have to do it. I believe in it. And now we are there. Now the bi-row is, by our customers at least, and by myself, and I think by everybody who knows rowing, considered to be by far the best rowing experience on the market. That's what I would love you to try out. I'm going to be at Head of the Charles in 2 weeks. And there will be Rich DiGiovanna, our Tita for the East Coast in the US. And there will be 2 bi-row pros, the ones that actually can tilt and you can do sweep rowing with it. And I would love you to try this out. And I might be able to do a quick technique workshop there at the Head of the Charles. I don't know if it's going to work out, but come by, say hello. And I'm planning to be at the Prince Albert II Challenge in Monaco on the first weekend of December. That's the first coastal event we're going to visit with bi-rower. So if you're there, stop by. I'm going to be right in the rowing club. Very much looking forward to meet you there. Until then, thank you very much for watching. I'm very much looking forward to the discussion on Rowing Zone and to your feedback in the YouTube comments. Till then, please leave a like. That does a lot for the algorithm. And subscribe if you haven't already done so. It's very important for me. Thank you very much for your support on Patreon, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing the next video. All the best. Bye-bye.
Check it out.